This is our two-dimensional array program again with the cookies. And so far we have created some methods, one to print out all our data, one to print out the number of cookies sold by each girl, and one to print out the total number of cookies sold. Let's see if we can, instead of just routinely printing these out, let's see if we can give our user an option. Ask the user, what is it you want to do? And then call the appropriate method. So here we have created a menu where we ask our user, what do you want to do? And we want our user to enter a 1, 2, or 3, print out the data, print out the cookies sold, print out the total number of cookies sold. We get our input from the keyboard, and now instead of just routinely printing everything out, I'm going to print it out depending on whether my choice was a 1, a 2, or a 3. And that means that I can do an if-else, but it's actually more readable to use a switch statement. So case 1, I'm going to print my data. I think that's what I said. If it was a 1, print your data. And don't forget the break. And let's see how this works. So if I print out a 1, if I input a 1, I get my data. Run it again and input a 2. And now I get my cookies sold, and run it again and get a 3 and get my total number of cookies sold. So far so good. But gee, it would be nice if maybe I could get this part into a method. If I do that, I'm going to have to find a way of returning that choice from the method back to main. And that is my return. So let's look at methods with return. We have here a method called getTotal. Method here is called getTotal. Main ends on line 16. So getTotal returns a value to main. And when a method returns a value, then the correct way to call it is in an assignment statement, because the value that it returns gets assigned to whatever is on the left-hand side of this assignment statement. So all that happens here is that we call getTotal. You'll notice that there are no parameters. I still need the parentheses. So I'm going to call my method. My method is going to give me a value back, and that value goes into sum. And here is the method. So this method needs itself, it needs 3 variables. It also needs a scanner, because it's going to ask the user for 2 integers. It's going to pick them up from the keyboard, add them together, and put the result into sum. And it then returns that value. Because sum is an int, and it's an int because num1 and num2 are both ints, therefore you add them together, you also get an int. Because sum is an int, the return type is int. Before we had void because we were not returning anything. Now we're returning something, and the type of the thing that we are returning is an int. Again, no parameters, but in place of void we put int because we're going to give an int back to main. What this method does, gets something from the keyboard, gets two things from the keyboard, num1 and num2, adds them together, puts the result into sum, and gives sum back to main. And then main can print it out. Incidentally, this does not have to be called sum. Let's change its name. Let's make it total. So now it's going to return total, and total is the value that this method is giving back to main. And so it goes in as the value of sum. Why sum? Because get total produces an int. It's called total. It's an int, and that int is then returned to main, and sum now gets its value. So sum is whatever get total returned, and then I can print it. Enter two integers. I'm going to enter a 3 and a 5, and I print out 8. I could also put them on the same line. Doesn't matter, because get next int just picks up the next integer that it sees, whether it's on the same line or the next line. I commented this out here. And here we are calling get total in a print line. First of all, let's make sure it works. To enter a 4 and a 6. And then it's asking me for another two numbers, and I'm going to give it a 7 and a 9. Now, why two prompts? Why did it say enter two integers twice? Because we called the method twice. The first time we called the method here in line 13, and the second time we called it here in line 15. It happens to be in a print line. So we're saying print whatever get total returns. So get total now has to, move into action and do something, and what it does is it says enter two integers. So there's the prompt from that second call to get total. And then we gave it two integers. It returned the 16, and that 16 was then printed. So when a method returns a value, meaning not void, anything else, the correct way to call that method is either in an assignment statement or in a print statement. You don't just call it by name. Let's go back to printing stars for a minute. Here we called print 5 stars just by name, no assignment statement, and not in a print line, just by calling its name. And this is the way that you call a method that returns void. When your method returns something else, such as here, and it's not void, then you have to call it either in an assignment statement or in a print line. That's the biggest mistake that students make, not knowing how to call a method. So going back now to our cookie problem, we had a menu here, a menu of choices for our user, and it would be nice if we could package this into a method, get a value, 1 through 3 from the keyboard, and give that back to main. And we can do that. Let me just grab this scanner. I had to put a scanner in here. And let me put it in here so that I can grab all of this code. And now choice is going to be returned by this method called menu. So I'm going to create a method and I'm going to return that number 1, 2, or 3. So public static int menu, and you recall it had no parameters. And it gets a choice, but it has to return it. Let's not call it choice. I don't want to confuse you. So same code from as before, I just literally grabbed it from main. I needed the scanner. There are all my print lines, getting something from the keyboard and returning it. And then when we call our menu, I just give a little space to make it more readable here. We call our method called menu. Menu gets a 1, 2, or 3 from the user and puts that into choice. And now we can do something depending on what that number is. Let's try it and just run it, say, once and make sure that it works. And there we go. Good. Getting better. You can see here, reading main, we've got our 3 arrays. We put some random data into that 2-dimensional array. Then we have a menu. We get some choice from our user. Depending on that choice, we do something. And maybe we can see here that actually we could go into a loop. We want to do it at least once. But a couple of things going on wrong here. And one is that it doesn't seem to know what choice is. And that's because I declared it inside this loop, which means it does not live outside the loop, and right here is outside the loop. So if I wanted to do that, I would need to declare it before our loop. and that would solve that problem. Now let's run it. Would be just a print line, and maybe that'll just fix things and just make it a little bit nicer looking for me. Well, now it seems to work fine, but our problem is we can't get out of this loop. We're in an infinite loop. It keeps on running. So I need a way to get out of the loop, and maybe what I need to do is 4 to quit. And now if my user enters a 4, let's see what happens. Now we quit. I need to alter my prompt here. Good. Good. So our program is getting better, incrementally getting better. We're packing things into methods so that we can see what's happening here. We've got our arrays. We've filled up, maybe that needs to go into a method. We've filled up our array, our two-dimensional array. We've offered a menu of choices to our user. Depending on what that is, we will call the appropriate method. And we've put this in a loop so that it goes, we do it over and over again.